The idea of being racially profiled every day, it's tiring.
He just started screaming at me, "You're an ISIS, you don't belong here, go back to your country."
Someone of my size and looks like me isn't always the guy that's always on the news.
I remember just crying and bawling my eyes out.
It takes away your humanity bit by bit. It's what allows violence to happen.
And then after that day, I didn't want to leave the house anymore.
I've seen how people act when I walk past them. There was an older woman in front of her and she looked back at me and she clutched her purse.
Existing in this way in Australia is really confrontational.
And in my head, I'm like, I won Survivor. I won $500,000. I don't need your chump change.
I think we're still political punching bags for most people.
I consider myself Australian. Why am I receiving this kind of hate?
Being Muslim means family, that's number one. Togetherness, community, peace, spirituality, one with the Creator.
Being Muslim to me is a lifestyle. It means the world to me. I feel like it's a way I navigate through life. It's, it teaches me discipline. It teaches me how to react to everyday situations. It shapes who I am as a person.
Islam is all about, serving God, submission to God, and I see my practice of being Muslim as seeing how I serve God's creations, how I take care of others, how I show up in community.
Growing up, I wasn't in a really religious family. Everyone in my family wasn't really practicing. My mum, my dad, Islam wasn't really forced upon us. Even now, I'm still the only one in the family who does wear the hijab.
I was born into Islam. I was raised a Muslim, very much a classic Sunni Lebanese Muslim. Growing up, I was told that I couldn't be queer and Muslim, that those things were diametrically opposed. When my sort of queerness started to emerge as a teenager, I really lost my faith for a really long time. From 11 to 14, when I was figuring out that I was queer, I call those years the Great Depression, because I was super depressed in that time. From 11, it was like, I'm not gay, I'm not gay, I'm not gay, I'm not gay, I'm not gay. And 12 was like, okay, I'm gay. I'm going to hell, I'm going to hell, I'm going to hell. 13 was like, okay, I'm gay, I'm going to hell, but I need to get a job, because at 13 I had to grapple with the idea that I would eventually probably get kicked out of home, which did happen.
After I finished school and the friends that I was around, I used to see them pray. Yeah, it was always so interesting to me, and I felt like I went through a phase where I felt completely lost, and I was searching for something to sort of guide me, and that's where I started to look more deeply into Islam. I went to lectures, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I just found the religion so beautiful, and I feel like I could really relate to it.
I lost my faith for a long time, and I found my way back to it through Sufism, through a practice of my religion that was focused on my individual relationship with God as opposed to this organized religion and what men have said about Islam in the past. I found a deeper connection and a personal connection to God that I think that feels right for me. I
did end up putting on the hijab when I was 18 years old because I knew it was a part of my religion. I wanted to follow Islam the proper ways. The way I grew up, I used to dress however I wanted to dress, wear bikinis, dress how a normal person would dress, you know what I mean? Even when I did put on the hijab, a lot of people were shocked. They were like, oh wow, you put on the hijab. And I just felt this sense of peace, I felt so modest. I felt like I could be appreciated for how I am as a person rather than how I look and how I dressed. I did feel respect with others around me as well. It was something that was meant to be, and haven't regretted that decision since.
There was a female, and one of the first questions she asked me was, how come in Islam men can have 4 wives but the women can't have 4 husbands? And then I actually didn't really know the answer to the question because I haven't really experienced, such confrontation like that. I wouldn't call it Islamophobia, but she did come from a place of anger. She came from a place of she's already made her conclusions and her judgments, and she didn't ask that question to learn. She asked that question to antagonize. And for people that do want to learn and understand, you trust that they'll be able to do the research they want to do. So from then on, I made sure it was very clear that I would answer questions that weren't asked to begin with through my actions. There was even one time I was in a drive-through with my brother and they gave me my food and I said, "Thank you so much." And then he was like, "Why are you like exaggerating your thank yous?" You know, and I'm like, I told him, I said, I don't need to be doing this, but I think it's important for the average person to understand that someone of my size and looks like me isn't always the guy that's always on the news or that's always, you know, threatening or, you know, the Western Sydney boy from the streets. Like, it's none of that. We shouldn't be overcompensating, but unfortunately that's the world we live in.
I just wish that there wasn't so many stereotypes, you know. I feel like Islam really embraces women. It really is about women and women being taken care of. They just think because, you know, we have to wear the hijab, like we're forced into it or something. Like, this is a decision that all of us make. Like, no one's ever told me to put it on, and I chose to make this decision for God.
Funnily enough, I get questions about the hijab. I was working in a phone store and I had a customer come in and we got deep into conversation. And then she stopped and then she said, "Why do you make your women wear the hijab?" I didn't acknowledge the fact that she said make. So I just assumed, you know, why do women wear the hijab? I told her, if I bought a diamond ring, I held it, and I wanted to walk to work, am I going to hold it walking around like this, or am I going to put it in a case? Am I going to protect it? Am I going to make sure that this diamond ring, nobody even gets to see it, let alone touch it, let alone anything? And I said, as Muslims, if we put that much value in just a diamond, imagine how much value we put in our brothers and sisters. Our men, our women, they're all sacred to us. You know, not anybody can just, you know, come and hug our men or women. It's not that we're making anyone, it's that they want to contain whatever it is that they want to contain within this hijab because they are special.
I grew up here in Australia on Darug land, and I also grew up in Lebanon, and I also grew up in the UAE as well, overseas. And it was very easy to be Muslim overseas. But I think growing up in Australia, because we're in such a Western context, my work doesn't understand that, like, maybe Ramadan starts today, maybe it starts tomorrow, I'll let you know. We have to sight the moon first. That doesn't have to be explained anywhere else. So I think being Muslim in Australia is a lot of explaining. You know, a lot of people think that Ramadan's just not about eating from sunrise to sunset, but it's also about not swearing, not lying, not cheating, not gossiping, which I'm guilty of, for sure.
Obviously, we fast the whole month, and a lot of people still think that we can drink water. So if I tell someone I'm fasting, then I'm like, oh, I can't even drink water. Like, we can't put anything in our mouth the whole day. One of the most difficult things that I've done was not being able to drink water. And this is in the lead up to the Olympics. And I was in the US in that time, and I fasted the whole month in high altitude. So thirsty. Training at the same time, because we were training like twice a day. There are exceptions to fasting, and that includes traveling, a woman being on her menstrual cycle. If you're really sick, you're also exempt. It's compulsory to make up the days after. I just wanted to sort of get into that Ramadan spirit and do it in that time. If I can fast and do this and spar, you know, on high altitude, be in another country, then I can do anything that I put my mind to.
You know, I think growing up Muslim in Australia is a really unique experience because you experience Islamophobia and racism as a family unit. You know, when I come home and I say, you know, Mum, someone called me a terrorist today, or someone was racist to me, my family knows how to support me, and we sort of come together as a family unit. I think my first experience with Islamophobia was watching my mum experience it as someone who wore hijab, and my sisters and my dad, and then experiencing it myself as a Muslim. I was a 15-year-old who got interrogated at the airport for 3 hours and accused of running off to join ISIS. So I think I got a really clear sense in Australia that I was othered. I got a really clear sense that I was a threat somehow. The idea of being racially profiled every day, it's tiring. Whether I'm called like a faggot or a pufta or a terrorist, it doesn't matter to me, but I think it takes away your humanity bit by bit. It's what allows violence to happen.
When I put on the hijab, it was only a few months before the siege that happened in, I think it was in Martin Place, that Lint Cafe siege. So I remember seeing that, and it was obviously a shock to all of us. I was really afraid at that time. I was nervous to leave the house, and I was scared because I knew that us as Muslims, especially as women, we were being sort of blamed for the incident because of our religion. So I did experience Islamophobia. I remember there was a stage where I was catching the bus home, and I was on the bus. There was a man on the bus, and he got off on the same stop as me, and then he was just walking behind me, and I was walking home, and he just started screaming at me, or you're on ISIS, you don't belong here, go back to your country. And I just remember like being like completely shocked, because I was like, you know, I'm born and raised here. And I don't know why I get emotional. Yeah, I remember just crying and bawling my eyes out. This happened so long ago, honestly, I didn't expect for it to even affect me now, but I just never thought that it would be, you know, possible for someone to be calling you those names. And it's like, what are you going to do, like call your ISIS brother on me? And then after that day, like I remember I didn't want to leave the house anymore, and I was so like worried about like what people would think of me, how they would see me. Yeah, it was a really scary time. When something happens, when someone does something so stupid in the name of our religion, which we don't justify at all, you know, we're the ones to blame. We're the ones that have to cop it the most, because we're visibly the Muslim ones. You feel like you have to explain yourself on why this is not us, this is not Islam, which it clearly isn't.
You know, it's all well and good to explain, you know, why Islam is such a beautiful religion and why there are so many people following the faith, but that can fall on deaf ears to majority of people. I've seen how people act when I walk past them or I'm walking down the street. Came out of the gym and I looked like your typical Western Sydney boy. I had my braids in and everything. I got the singlet on, and I was just walking down the street, and there was an older woman in front of her, and she looked back at me and she clutched her purse. And in my head, I'm like, I won Survivor. I won $500,000. I don't need your chump change. But like things like that, you just know for a fact how you are being perceived. And I think anybody of colour can understand that as well.
I exist as a Muslim like this. I walk around like this. This is how I go to work. This is how I go on dates. This is how I walk around my home. You know, it's who I am in my private and my public life. And I think existing in this way in Australia is really confrontational. Being Muslim in Australia is to be provocative somehow, because for some reason we don't fit Australian values. For some reason, you know, they perceive some sort of conflict with the Aussie way of life. I think we're still seen as Muslim before we're seen as Australian, or not seen as Australian at all. I think we're still political punching bags for most people.
I feel like every time I compete, you know, or there's like a post that goes viral on social media, there's always people that have their comments and have their things to say, and it's always around my headscarf and my religion. And one of the times that really affected me would have been right before the Olympics, just a few days out from my fight, where I was doing the Aussie chant at the opening ceremony. So yeah, it was really, really horrible, because a lot of the people would say that I'm not Australian, and the post did go viral. There was millions of views on all platforms, Instagram, you know, TikTok, and yeah, just people saying horrible things. And you can imagine how much that would have affected me. Just honestly, you feel horrible, and you feel like, you know, I've grown, I'm born here, don't know anything else but Australia. It's upsetting, because you're like, you know, this is me, this is who I am. I consider myself Australian, like why am I receiving this kind of hate? But I remember when I started boxing, it gave me a tremendous amount of confidence, where I just felt invincible, and if something was to happen, I have the skills to back myself.
I think when our parents came, there was so much of that Islamophobic rhetoric that said, let's just create our own enclaves, let's just exist here where it's safer for us to exist out west, or in Auburn or Bankstown, or wherever it might be. And so it was all about becoming more insular to protect people who are coming up. And I think younger Muslims don't operate from a place of fear and don't operate from a place of shame and don't operate from a place of conformity. They're not interested in assimilating as much as they are in being radical and expressive and saying, I can be this expressive Muslim, I can be culturally Arab and all these other things, and be seen as Australian, and be part of this multicultural society. Even as a Muslim saying the word radical, I can feel people getting tense. But, you know, I just mean, you know, being able to exist as yourself, which is radical in this space.
I think majority of the time, Muslims are being represented very poorly. When we see something big happen in the news, honestly, the first question as a Muslim that we always ask is, let's just hope he's not a Muslim, because we're going to be taking 5 steps back after the progress we've been making.
I do feel the pressure to represent my community. I also completely reject the idea that I represent my community. I think it's not fair to put it on me. I'll never forget going to a Muslim school and in morning assembly in front of everyone there, being told, everywhere you go, your name is Mohammad, and everywhere you go, you represent Muslims, you represent this community, you represent everyone here, so be careful. Be on your best behavior. Don't do anything wrong, don't color outside of the lines, be the most ideal Australian that you can be, and don't bring shame to our religion, don't bring shame to our community, don't bring shame to our culture. And this idea of representing your whole community is something that Muslims live with all over the world.
First Middle Eastern person on Australian Survivor and first Muslim and the first one to win it. Absolutely insane. I didn't really go on to win. I genuinely went on to have a bit of fun and change the perception of young Muslim men, specifically. I wanted there to be a young Muslim Middle Eastern male that was a bit cheeky, a bit funny, but also respectful at the same time. I can uphold my religion and my values. And that's the sort of balance I wanted to create, not only for the Muslim men, but again, for the average Australian. One of my favourite parts of the entire series is actually on the last episode. Backs up against the wall. I'm in this torturous challenge. I'm the heaviest person there, which doesn't favour for me in the challenge. And I just start reciting verses of the Quran out loud. So that specific part was shown all over Australia, and I could not have been more proud of something like that, because at the end of the day, you don't need to know anything about Islam. But if you watch that scene where it's a raw human emotion of faith, I think anybody with any sort of emotion would feel something. I think people can understand that Islam isn't this religion, this radical religion that's all of the news that we see. Islam can be in, you know, your Tom, Dick and Harry, or your Muhammad, Ahmed or Ali. And I think for me that's the most important thing to show people that know nothing about Islam.
I show up as this person every day because I think some people try and reject my Muslimness or my queerness, and I think this whole situation is me saying that you really can't. It sucks when, you know, just what you're wearing is politicized, but I'm aware of that and I still wear it with pride. Pride of my Muslim identity, my Arab identity, and my queer identity.
Some of my proudest moments in my life is, you know, representing Australia on the big stage, you know, the Commonwealth Games, the World Championships, the Olympics. As an Australian woman in the hijab, I'm the first Muslim boxer. So to show, you know, other Muslim women, you can achieve anything that you want, regardless of you wearing the hijab, I think has been incredible. And I've proven to break those barriers over and over again.
I worked at an Islamic school for a bit. I taught boys from year 10 to year 12. And it was an all-boys Islamic school in the heart of Western Sydney. It's either you're like this bookworm that, you know, studies 24/7 and then prays, or you're this like cool guy that doesn't really care about anything. There's no in-between. I think it's important for young males to see that you can be that cool guy, that funny person, but also at the same time uphold yourself in a certain manner. For example, when I was teaching, at any point did I hear a bro in the classroom? you're in trouble. we're gonna have a talk. There's no bros, there's no cuz. Like these small things is what alters perceptions of us from other Australians. But at the end of the day, a 14-year-old boy isn't going to listen to you lecture him. What he's going to do is be impressionable. So he's going to watch you. He's going to see how you act. If you act a certain way, then and if he likes it, if it's cool enough for him, he will copy that. So the idea is to still act that way that he wants to be like, but at the same time uphold those Islamic values.
You know, I've never been asked that question, how does your religion bring you joy? You know, Islam brings me joy in the ways that it gives me guidance, in the way that it helps me help others. I think in times of struggle and strife, I'm always praying and I'm always asking God for guidance and I'm always listening. And I'm asking myself, you know, what would the Prophet do in this situation? What is best for my community at this point?
All that's bad in the world or all negativity, for me, I found an answer in everything in Islam. If I ever have a doubt in something or if I'm feeling something, or I can always just turn to God and He would always make me feel safe.
Spending Ramadan and Eid, it's like a Christmas celebration to us. Being with your family, all breaking a fast at the same time, you're all at the dinner table and you meet up with friends and everyone gets together. So I feel like that really does bring me joy.
It reminds us that we should be grateful for all the things, you know, provided to us, but also understanding the positions of the less fortunate, taking a step out of the rat race that we live in of consumerism. To have more than 2 billion people fasting all at once is something truly incredible, and something that we hold dearly to our hearts.
Being Muslim is big and broad and varied and expansive, and it has room for me and it has room for people who disagree with me as well. I wish people knew that Muslims were just like anyone else. There's so much more we share than not.